The helicopter was falling toward the ocean, and the woman who owned it could not stop it. That was the thing Adrienne Cole could not make her mind accept. Standing on the rear deck of her yacht 11 miles offshore, with a handheld radio shaking in a hand that had signed billion-dollar agreements, without trembling that there was now a thing happening in the world, the most important thing that had ever happened to her. And her money could not touch it. Her name could not touch it. Her will, which had bent banks and boards and governments, could not reach up into that gray sky and hold the falling aircraft where her daughter was. The radio was full of voices. Her daughters, 16 years old, thin and high and trying so hard to be brave. It keeps dropping, I don't know what to do. I don't. The heliport, somewhere on shore, a young dispatcher out of his depth. Coast Guard is launching. Estimated standby, estimated 8 minutes. 8 minutes. The helicopter did not have 8 minutes. Anyone could hear that. The engine was making a sound that came across the radio in surges, a rising whine, then a sick falling off, then a rise again, and beneath it the altitude in her daughter's voice kept dropping, and the ocean was right there, gray and enormous and patient. Somebody landed. Adrienne screamed into the radio, and she did not recognize her own voice. Somebody there has to be someone. Get me someone who can land it. A pause on the frequency. Then the young dispatcher, helpless. Ma'am, the pilot is. He's not responding, and there's no one here qualified to talk her through. I'm sorry. With the engine doing that, I don't think anyone can land it now. No one can land it now. Adrienne Cole heard those words and felt the bottom go out of the world, and then a new voice came onto the frequency. It did not come on loud. That was the first thing in all that panic, all that rising noise. The new voice was quiet, steady. The voice of a man who had been somewhere like this before and had decided, a long time ago, that the only useful thing to be in a moment like this was calm. Heliport. This is Calder on the ground line. I've got the frequency. Who is this? Adrienne demanded. Who are you? Are you Coast Guard? Are you? No, ma'am, the voice said. I fuel the helicopters. A sound came out of Adrienne that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. You fuel them? My daughter is dying, and they give me the man who pumps the gas. No one can land it now. No one, oh? The quiet voice said. And then, with no boast in it at all, the way a man states a thing he simply knows, but I can bring it down. In 5 minutes. A beat of silence on the whole frequency. Then the voice again, not to Adrienne now. To the falling helicopter. To the terrified girl at the controls. Gentle. Unhurried. The voice of someone reaching out across 11 miles of gray air to take hold of a child's hands with nothing but sound. Sophie. My name is Wes. I'm going to be right here with you the whole way down. You're not falling, sweetheart, you're flying. We're just going to fly it down together. Now, first thing. I need you to breathe with me. Adrienne Cole had built an empire out of refusing to be surprised. That was the truest way to describe what her company did. Underneath the jargon Meridian Data, the analytics firm she had founded in a spare bedroom 20 years ago, and grown into a company that governments and corporations paid enormous sums to. Because what Meridian sold, in the end, was the elimination of surprise. Patterns, forecasts, the future, rendered into numbers far enough in advance that you could get in front of it. Adrienne had become wealthy beyond reckoning by selling the one thing every powerful person on earth wanted most, the feeling of being in control. She believed in it the way other people believed in God. Control was not, for Adrienne, a personality trait. It was a survival strategy that had hardened into a worldview over a lifetime. She had grown up in a house where everything was unpredictable, a father whose moods arrived like weather, a household that could be warm at breakfast and a war zone by dinner for reasons no child could forecast, and she had learned, young, that the only safety was in seeing things coming, in removing the variables, in being the one who decided, so that no one could decide for you. She had run her company that way, and it had worked. She had run her life that way, and it had worked. She had tried to run her daughter that way, and it had not worked at all. Sophie was 16, and she had arrived in Adrienne's carefully controlled life, like a permanent, unforecasted variable, willful, dreamy, allergic to schedules, in love with 100 things that produced no measurable outcome. They had been close once, when Sophie was small. Somewhere in the last few years a distance had opened that Adrienne did not know how to close, because closing it would have required the one thing Adrienne had never learned how to do, which was to stop managing and simply be present without an agenda. The weekend on the yacht had been an attempt. Adrienne would not have called it that. She had called it, when her assistant put it on the calendar, blocking time with Sophie. But underneath the language of the calendar was a mother who had felt her daughter drifting and had reached, the only way she knew how, for an event, a controlled environment, a beautiful boat, 3 days offshore, where there would be no school and no friends and no devices with signal, where Adrienne could fix the relationship the way she fixed everything, by allocating resources to it. Sophie had not wanted to come. Sophie had wanted to stay for a thing with her friends, and there had been a fight. The kind of fight that ends with a 16-year-old saying you don't actually care. You just want to control me, and Adrienne, stung, had said the thing she would replay 1,000 times in the hours that followed. Fine. I'll go ahead on Friday. You come Saturday on the helicopter, and we'll talk when you get here. And we will talk, Sophie. That's not optional. So Adrienne had gone ahead. And on Saturday, Sophie had boarded the helicopter at the coastal heliport with Frank Doyle, the family's charter pilot for 6 years, a steady, grandfatherly man whom Sophie adored, who had been letting her take the controls under his eye for the better part of a year, because Sophie, to her mother's quiet bafflement, had fallen in love with flying. It was the one thing Sophie did that Adrienne couldn't optimize, couldn't credential, couldn't put on a college application better than anyone else's. Sophie just loved it. The pilot said she had good hands. They had lifted off into a clear afternoon, and somewhere over the open water, 11 miles from the yacht, with the coast a thin line behind them, and the ocean everywhere ahead, 2 things had happened in the same 60 seconds. Frank Doyle had put a hand to his chest, made a sound, and slumped against his harness. And the engine, the turbine that had spun without complaint for 6,000 hours, had begun, for reasons that would take investigators weeks to fully document, to surge. The most controlled woman in the world stood on the deck of her yacht and listened to her daughter's voice come apart over the radio, and understood, completely and for the first time in her adult life, that she controlled nothing. Nothing at all. Wes Calder fueled helicopters for a living, and he was at peace with it. And that peace had cost him more than anyone at the heliport knew. He was 44. He worked the ground operation at the coastal heliport and the marina that shared its fuel dock, pumping Jet A into charter aircraft and gasoline into pleasure boats. Marshalling helicopters, onto and off the pad, doing the unglamorous, invisible, essential work that keeps a small aviation operation running. The pilots who flew in and out knew him as Wes, the calm guy on the ground, good with his hands, never flustered. Most of them did not know what he had been. What he had been was a rescue swimmer's worst nightmare and best hope, an aircraft commander, United States Coast Guard, 11 years, flying search and rescue helicopters off this same coast, and others, into the kind of weather that sends everyone else inside. He had pulled people off sinking boats in 40-knot winds. He had hovered a multi-ton aircraft 30 feet over a heaving deck at night, holding it there by feel and nerve, while a swimmer went down on the cable, holding it steady inside a margin of error measured in feet, for as long as it took, because below him were human beings who would die if his hands shook. He had been, by the assessment of the people who trained such men, exceptional one of those rare pilots for whom the aircraft becomes less a machine than a limb, who could feel a rotor system loading and unloading the way you feel your own balance. And he had been, above all of that, calm. It was the thing they had recognized in him early and trained him to refine, the ability to take the fear in a cockpit his own and everyone else's and put it somewhere it couldn't reach his hands or his voice. He had talked panicking crewmen through their worst moments in a voice you could have set a clock by. Fear, he had learned, travels by voice. And so does calm. A calm voice in a falling aircraft is not a small thing. It is sometimes the whole thing. He had given it up for Claire. Claire was his wife, had been his wife. She had gotten sick when Rin was 4, the fast, merciless kind, the kind that does not negotiate. And in the 18 months that followed, Wes had made the only decision a man like him could make, and still be a man he could live with. He had taken himself off flight status. He had been home. He had held Claire's hand through the end of it, and then he had held his daughter's hand through the beginning of a life without a mother. And he had understood that you cannot fly rescue missions into 40-knot winds and also be the only parent a grieving child has left. The Coast Guard had been good to him. There had been a desk offered, a path back. He had looked at Ren 5 years old, just learning that her mother was not coming back, and he had hung up his wings without drama and without regret, because the math was simple, and there was only one answer to it. He had moved them to the coast. He had taken the job at the heliport because it kept him near the only world he had ever loved besides his family, close enough to smell the Jet A and hear the rotors, far enough that he never had to leave Rin for a single night. He fueled the aircraft that other men flew, and he did not let himself feel sorry about it, because self-pity was a luxury, and he had a daughter to raise. Rin was 10 now. She was a strange and wonderful kid, quiet like him, observant, in love with the ocean and the things in it and above it. She kept a list of every bird she had ever identified, and she shared with her father one private ritual that was theirs alone, an old Marine Band radio scanner, scuffed and beloved, that they listened to together on the dock on the weekends. The two of them, eating sandwiches and tracking the chatter of a working coast, the fishing boats, the harbor master, the Coast Guard, the aircraft overhead. To Ren it was a window into a world of competent people doing important things. She did not fully understand that her father had once been one of the voices on a radio exactly like it. He had told her he used to fly for the Coast Guard. He had not told her the rest. The rest did not seem like a thing to lay on a 10-year-old. On that Saturday afternoon, Wes and Ren were on the fuel dock with their sandwiches and their scanner, and the scanner which Wes had long ago, out of an old habit he'd never broken, programmed to monitor the local aviation frequencies, came alive with a mayday. Ren heard it first. She always did. She listened the way some kids watch screens. "Dad," she said, going still. "Dad, somebody's in trouble." Wes Calder set down his sandwich, and the world he had walked away from 9 years ago reached up through a battered radio speaker and called him by his true name. He knew the aircraft by the sound before he knew anything else. That was the thing 11 years builds into a man and never takes back out. Wes heard the surge coming through the open mic on the frequency, the rising whine, the sick falling off, the rise again, and his whole body identified it before his conscious mind caught up. A single turbine helicopter, an A-star class machine, and that surging was a fuel control fault, a governor problem. The engine hunting for a power setting it couldn't hold. Not a clean failure. Not a dead engine, which would have been, in its terrible way, simpler, a partial failure. Surging power. The hardest kind to fly, because the aircraft keeps half promising to save itself and then breaking the promise. He'd seen it twice in his career. He'd trained pilots on exactly this, in the simulator, year after year. He stood up. "Wren," he said, "stay right here. Don't move from this dock." He crossed the fuel dock and went into the heliport's small operations office at something between a walk and a run. And inside it, he found what he expected to find in a small operation on a Saturday. A single young dispatcher named Kevin, 23 years old. A good kid with a private certificate and no business anywhere near a situation like this. White-faced, gripping the edge of the desk, the base radio in front of him crackling with a mayday he had no idea how to answer. "Coast Guard is launching," Kevin was saying into the mic, voice cracking. Estimated 8 minutes. Wes listened for 3 seconds, just 3, and built the picture. A girl's voice, terrified at the controls. An adult, the pilot, not answering, which meant incapacitated. A woman's voice on a separate radio, offshore, frantic. The owner. The aircraft surging and descending over open water. 8 minutes to a Coast Guard launch that hadn't even left the ground. 8 minutes was a death sentence. Wes knew the water temperature this time of year. He knew what a helicopter does when it hits the sea, the rotor strike, the roll, the inversion, the cold that takes your strength in 90 seconds, and your life not long after. He knew that ditching a helicopter into the open ocean is, for an experienced crew with survival gear and training, a coin flip. For a 16-year-old alone, it was not a coin flip. It was an ending. The aircraft did not need a rescue in 8 minutes. It needed a pilot right now. And the nearest pilot who knew this exact failure on this exact type of aircraft was standing in a fuel-stained shirt in a Saturday operations office, 9 years out of the cockpit, with a sandwich still on the dock outside. "Kevin," Wes said, "give me the headset." Kevin looked at him, the fuel guy, with the particular confusion of a drowning man being handed something by someone he doesn't recognize as a lifeguard. It was the offshore voice that objected. The owner. She'd heard him key up. "Who is this?" The woman demanded, raw. "Who are you? Are you Coast Guard?" "Are you?" "No, ma'am," Wes said, taking the headset from Kevin's hands, settling it on, his voice already dropping into the register he hadn't used in 9 years and had never actually lost. "I fuel the helicopters." "You fuel them?" The woman's voice broke into something jagged. "My daughter is dying, and they give me the man who pumps the gas. No one can land it now." "No one, oh?" Wes said. He looked out the office window at the gray sky over the water, where somewhere a child was falling. "But I can bring it down. In 5 minutes." He did not say it to be believed. He said it because it was true, and because the girl in that aircraft needed, more than she needed anything else in the world, to hear one adult say a true and certain thing in a steady voice. Then, he stopped talking to the woman entirely. He keyed the mic to the aircraft, and he made his voice into the thing it had been built to be, the calm at the center, the hand reaching across the air. "Sophie, my name is Wes. I'm going to be right here with you the whole way down. You're not falling, sweetheart, you're flying. We're just going to fly it down together." A breath. "Now, first thing, I need you to breathe with me. In and out. Tell me you can hear me." A crackle. Then the small, shattered voice of a girl who had just been handed a rope in the dark. I can hear you. I can hear you. Please don't go." "I'm not going anywhere," Wes Calder said. "Not until your feet are on that deck. Now let's fly." Out on the fuel dock, a 10-year-old girl named Wren stood beside a battered radio scanner, with a half-eaten sandwich in her hand, and listened to her father, the man who made her breakfast and pumped the gas, and used to fly for the Coast Guard, become someone she had never met. The first thing was the rotor. Wes knew that everything depended on the spinning disc above Sophie's head not slowing down. A helicopter flies on rotor RPM the way a person lives on a heartbeat. Let it droop too far, and the aircraft stops being an aircraft and becomes a falling weight. The surging engine was the threat, but the rotor was the life. Sophie, I need you to listen to my voice, and only my voice. Forget the gauges screaming at you. There's a lever in your left hand, the one that goes up and down, by your seat. That's the collective. I need you to lower it. Gently smooth, like setting down a full cup of coffee. It'll make me go down faster, it will, Wes said. Calm, certain. And that's all right. That's us, trading a little height to keep your rotor alive. We have height to trade. We do not have rotor to lose. Lower it, smooth. Now, talk to me. A pause that lasted a year. Then, okay. Okay, I lowered it. Good girl. The wine smoothing out? A little. It keeps surging. Let it surge. We're not going to fix the engine. We're going to manage it. The engine's confused. You and I are not. Right pedal a touch if the nose wanders. Keep the nose just below the horizon. You've flown this. Frank let you fly this. Your hands know this. And the strangest thing happened. Out over the gray ocean, the girl's hands began to remember. Because Frank Doyle, slumped now and silent in the seat beside her, had spent a year doing the thing that would turn out to be the most important thing he ever did. He had let a teenager who loved flying actually fly. Sophie had 100 hours of muscle memory she didn't know she had. She had held this aircraft straight and level over this same ocean a dozen times, with Frank's hands resting easy in his lap. The terror had buried all of it. Wes's voice was digging it back up, one calm instruction at a time. 90 seconds. Sophie. Wes said, not because she needed the clock, but because a destination is easier to fly toward than an abyss. In 90 seconds, you're going to see your mom's boat. We're flying you to the boat. Out on the yacht, Adrienne Cole had gone silent on the radio, because Wes had told her to, in 4 words that she would obey for the rest of her life, ma'am. Let me work. She stood at the rail with the captain beside her, and she did the hardest thing she had ever done, which was nothing, which was to stand there and trust a stranger's voice with the only thing that mattered, because there was no longer any version of the world in which her control could help. Wes brought the captain in then, because a rescue is never one person. Yacht Meridian. This is Calder. Captain, I need your deck. Turn your bow into the wind and hold the slowest steady speed you can. Give her a stable platform and a clean wind down the deck. Clear everyone off that helipad and stand by with throw rings and anything that floats. You're her runway now. Bow into the wind, dead slow, deck clear. The captain came back, and there was a new steadiness in his voice too, because that is what a calm command voice does on a frequency it spreads. Coming around now. 3 minutes. Sophie, look out your right side. Do you see it? The white boat. Bow turning towards you. A sound came over the frequency then that Adrienne would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life, her daughter, crying and laughing at once. I see it. I see the boat, Mom's boat. That's your runway, Wes said. Now here's the whole game, and you can do every piece of it. We're going to fly a long, shallow descent to that deck. Not steep, shallow, like a slow slide down a hill toward your mom. I'm going to talk you through every foot. When I say cushion, you're going to raise that collective slow. Both hands if you need to soften us right at the bottom. Not yank. Cushion, like catching an egg. What if I do it wrong? You're not going to do it wrong, Wes said, because I'm not going to let you. I have brought down aircraft worse than this one in weather worse than this, and I have never once lost the person on the radio. You are not going to be the first. We clear? We're clear. Then let's fly her home. What happened over the next 90 seconds, the people aboard the Meridian would describe for years and never quite capture the surging helicopter coming down out of the gray on a long, shallow line. Wobbling, correcting, wobbling. A 16-year-old's hands and a fueler's voice flying it together across 11 miles of nothing. the engine hunting and the rotor holding. Lower, lower, the deck rising up white and steady, with the wind coming clean down its length. The captain's crew braced at the edges with rings in their hands. Steady, Sophie, steady. You're doing it. 10 feet. 5. Cushion, now nice and easy. The skids touched the deck of the yacht, Meridian, and the helicopter settled onto it like a tired bird. And Sophie Cole rolled the throttle off the way Wes told her to in the same breath, and the surging engine wound down to silence, and the rotor spun slower, slower, and stopped. The whole frequency was silent. Then, onto the silence, a small voice, wrecked and alive. I'm down. Wes, I'm down. I'm on the deck. In the operations office, Wes Calder closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he keyed the mic one last time and said, in the steady voice, I know you are, sweetheart. You flew it down. That was all you. A pause. Now go hug your mom. Later, the Coast Guard would pull the time-stamped recording for the incident report first contact from the ground station Calder to skids down on the Meridian. 4 minutes, 51 seconds. The Coast Guard helicopter that had been launching arrived 9 minutes later and found nothing to rescue a girl wrapped in a blanket in her mother's arms on the deck of a yacht, a pilot already being worked on by the crew, who had gotten his pulse back. Frank Doyle would survive. The cardiac event had been real and serious, but the man would live to learn that the teenager he'd spent a year teaching had flown him down out of the sky. On shore, in the operations office, Wes Calder took off the headset and set it down on the desk and stood there for a moment with his hands flat on the surface, the way a man stands when his body needs to feel something solid while it comes back to itself. Kevin, the young dispatcher, was staring at him. Who are you? Kevin said. Wes didn't answer right away. He was looking out the window, where, on the fuel dock, a small figure was running toward the office as fast as her legs would carry her. Rin hit the office door and crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her father's waist and held on. And Wes Calder put his hand on the back of his daughter's head, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. Dad, Rin said finally, into his shirt. Her voice was strange. Dad, that was you, on the radio. That was you. That was me, Wes said. You brought it down. The girl was going to crash in the water and she pulled back and looked up at him. And her face had on it an expression he had never seen there before. An expression that was rearranging everything she thought she knew about the man who made her oatmeal. You said you used to fly for the Coast Guard. You didn't say you were. You didn't say you could do that. Wes knelt down so he was level with her. That's what flying for the Coast Guard was. He said quietly. That. Bringing people home out of bad places. It's what I did for 11 years. Why did you stop? And here was the question, the one he had never fully answered for her, because the answer put a weight on a child that he'd always thought a child shouldn't carry. But she had just heard him do the thing. She had heard the whole world go quiet and a girl's life come down out of the sky on the end of her father's voice. She was old enough now. She had earned the truth. I stopped, Wes said, because your mom got sick, and then your mom was gone, and you needed somebody to be home every single night and never leave, and there's no way to do that job and do that. You can't fly into storms at 3 a.m. and also be the only parent a little girl has. He held her by the shoulders. So I stopped flying. And Rin, I want you to hear this and believe it. I have never been sorry. Not once. Not for 1 single second. I traded the sky for you, and it was the easiest trade I ever made. Rin looked at him for a long time. But you can still do it, she said slowly. You didn't lose it. You put it away. For me. I put it away for you. And today you took it back out. Today, Wes said, somebody needed it. The woman came ashore that evening. Adrienne Cole had her daughter helicoptered to a hospital by the Coast Guard to be checked, found to be unhurt. And then she had done something her staff had never seen her do. She had canceled everything, and she had driven herself, alone, to a small coastal heliport to find the man who pumped the gas. She found him on the fuel dock, where he was of all things, finishing the cleanup from the day, coiling a hose. Because the work didn't stop being there just because the day had held a miracle. His 10-year-old daughter sat on an overturned bucket nearby, with a battered radio scanner in her lap, watching her father with eyes that hadn't stopped being amazed. Adrienne Cole, who commanded rooms, who had never in 20 years been unsure of what to say, stood at the end of the dock and could not find a single word. Wes saw her. He knew who she was. He set down the hose. "She's okay?" he asked. The first thing. Of course it was the first thing. "She's okay." Adrienne's voice did something it had not done in front of another person in many years. "Because of you. She's okay because of you." "She's okay because she had good hands and she listened," Wes said. "I just talked. She flew it." "Don't," Adrienne said, and it came out almost angry, the way the deepest gratitude sometimes does in people who don't have practice feeling it. "Don't do that. Don't make it small. I stood on that boat and I could not do anything. I have spent my entire life making sure I would never be powerless, and I stood there powerless, and a man I have never met reached out of a radio and saved my child." She stopped. Her eyes were wet and she let them be, which was its own kind of surrender. "I don't even know what you are. They told me you fuel helicopters." "I do fuel helicopters." That voice on the radio did not fuel helicopters, so he told her. Standing on the fuel dock in the last light, he told Adrienne Cole the short version of a long story: the 11 years, the rescues, the wife who got sick, the daughter who needed a father more than the sky needed a pilot, the wings hung up without regret. And Adrienne Cole, the woman who controlled everything, listened to the story of a man who had voluntarily given up the one thing he was great at, because love asked him to, and she understood that she was in the presence of a kind of strength she had never once encountered in any boardroom on earth. "I want to give you something," Adrienne said. "I need to. Please don't fight me on it. I have more money than 3 people could spend in a lifetime, and you just gave me back the only thing I have that matters. Name it. A house. The shop of your dreams. Anything. I mean anything." Wes Calder was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head, not sharply, not with pride, but the way a man shakes his head at an offer that simply doesn't fit the shape of him. "I don't want anything for it," he said. "And I'm not saying that to be noble. I'm saying it because the second I take money for bringing that girl down, it turns into a transaction, and it wasn't one. It was the thing I'm for. You don't pay a man for being who he is." He glanced at Wren on her bucket. "Besides, I've got everything I built this whole life around right there on that bucket, listening to a radio. I'm not a man who's missing things." Adrienne looked at him. Then she looked for a long moment at the little girl with the scanner, and the most controlling woman in the world did the wisest thing she had ever done, which was to stop trying to give the man what she thought he should want, and to ask instead. She walked over and crouched down in front of Wren, the way you do with a child whose father has just taught you something about love. "Hi," Adrienne said. "I'm Sophie's mom. Your dad saved her today." "I know," Wren said. "I heard it. On this." She held up the scanner like a sacred object. "You like the radio. I love the radio. We listen to the boats and the Coast Guard. My dad used to be one of the voices." She said it with a new and enormous pride. "I didn't even know how good he was until today." Adrienne smiled, and it cost her nothing, and it was the first easy smile she'd smiled in longer than she could remember. "Can I ask you something, Wren? Not your dad. You." She lowered her voice like they were conspirators. If you could do anything in the whole world, anything, what would it be? Rin looked at her father, then back, and answered with the instant certainty of a child who has thought about exactly this 1,000 times. I want to fly, she said, like he did. I want to be a voice on the radio that brings people home. And so, in the end, Adrienne Cole did not buy Wes Calder a house, or a shop, or anything at all. She did something quieter and more exact, and it took her months to arrange properly because she insisted on doing it the right way. She established a fund small in the scheme of her fortune, enormous in the scheme of a fueler's life that would pay in full for Rin Calder's education and flight training. Every hour of it, all the way to the cockpit, the day she was old enough to begin. No strings, no publicity, just a door held open for a 10-year-old who wanted to be a voice that brings people home. And she did one more thing, the thing that mattered most. She found Wes a way back into the sky. She didn't push it on him. She simply made it possible, funded a flight instruction position at the heliport, part-time daytime hours, never overnight, built entirely around a single father's life, so that a man who had put his gift in a drawer for 9 years for the love of his daughter could take it back out, a little at a time, on his own terms, teaching, flying by day, home every single night, so that the next 16-year-old who fell in love with flying would have someone like Wes Calder to learn from. The first day Wes flew again, he took Rin up with him. Just a short hop, a clear afternoon, the coast unrolling green and gold below them, and the ocean enormous and blue. The same ocean that had nearly taken a girl, and had given Wes Calder back the thing he'd set down for love. Rin sat in the left seat with a headset too big for her head, and her hands hovering over the controls he let her touch. And she looked out over the world the way you look at a thing you have wanted your whole short life. And she keyed the intercom and said, in a small, steady voice that was already practicing, "Dad, am I flying it?" Wes Calder, who had given up the sky and gotten it back, looked at his daughter. "You're flying it," he said. "I'm right here. But you're flying it." There is a kind of strength that the world has no way of seeing. It does not wear a uniform most of the time. It does not announce itself. It pumps the gas and coils the hose and makes the oatmeal and stands quietly at the edge of a world it used to be at the center of, asking nothing. Because somewhere along the way it decided that love was worth more than recognition and made the trade without complaint. We walk past that kind of strength every day. We hand it our luggage and our fuel orders and our small talk, and we do not know what it is. We do not know that the man pumping the Jet A once held a multi-ton aircraft steady over a heaving deck at night so that someone's father could come home. We do not know that the woman behind the counter, the quiet man at the next desk, the person we have decided is ordinary, set down something extraordinary years ago for a reason we never asked about. Adrienne Cole built an empire on the elimination of surprise. She believed that control was safety, that money was power, that the future could be forecast and managed and owned. And then her daughter fell out of the sky, and every dollar and every algorithm and every ounce of her formidable will was worth precisely nothing, and the thing that reached up and caught her child was a voice, a calm voice, belonging to a man she would never have looked at twice, who had spent his whole life learning how to be steady in the exact moment everyone else came apart. He brought it down in 4 minutes and 51 seconds. He did it for free, because some things are not transactions, and he knew the difference. And when the woman with everything tried to repay him, he wanted nothing for himself, because a man who has already made the only trade that ever mattered to him is not a man who is missing anything. The most powerful person in the story turned out to be the one with the least. He just never needed anyone to know it.